Today, the Supreme Court heard a challenge to President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, a right that has been fundamental to this country for more than 150 years. The Trump administration is trying to revisit the meaning of the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, which states, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Some of the justices seemed a little skeptical of the administration's arguments. Watch.
You say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual.
8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
I get the point, thinking about, gee, European countries don't have this, or most other countries, many other countries in the world don't have this. Doesn't that, I guess I'm not seeing the relevance as a legal, constitutional, interpretive matter.
How are we determining when or whether a newborn child is a citizen of the United States under your rule?
Trump himself was actually in the courtroom for the beginning of the hearing. It's the first time that a sitting president has attended oral argument. And afterward, he posted, "We are the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship," which is actually not true. But with that, I want to bring in the expert on all things constitutional, Professor Melissa Murray of NYU Law School. She was a law clerk for Sonia Sotomayor on the federal bench before her nomination to the Supreme Court. Melissa is also the author of the U.S. Constitution, A Comprehensive and Annotated Guide to the Modern Reader, out next month. The rest of our nightcap panel is still here. Melissa, thanks so much for joining. I want to start with laying out the administration's case. What are they basing their argument on, and how do they propose we decide who is a citizen?
Well, Catherine, it's a pretty broad claim, one that 10 years ago would have been deemed the province of kooks and cranks, but with careful stewarding and just real persistence, the administration has managed to make this off-the-wall theory on the wall and to debut it at the Supreme Court today. Basically, the point that they are making is that the 14th Amendment was intended to repudiate the Supreme Court's decision in 1857's Dred Scott versus Sandford, which said that African Americans could never be citizens of the United States. It is true that the 14th Amendment repudiated Dred Scott and made citizens of those born in the United States. But the administration goes further to say that because it was meant to repudiate Dred Scott, it was never intended to address the question of whether those who were in the United States but not subject to the United States jurisdiction, and they group immigrants in this category, whether the children of those immigrants could be citizens. And that's the whole question here. The principle of birthright citizenship is one that's been ingrained in our history. As you say, it's been recognized since 150 years ago with the 14th Amendment, but it was actually recognized even earlier. It's a vestige of the Anglo-American legal tradition that was adopted by the colonists at the time of the founding. So Dred Scott was a departure from it. The 14th Amendment corrected it. And when the 14th Amendment was debated, they debated the fact that immigrants were in their midst. There had been an influx of Irish immigrants in the 1840s, Chinese immigrants in the 1850s. They were living with immigration, and the framers of the 14th Amendment talked seriously about whether a grant of birthright citizenship would also include the children of those foreign-born nationals.
So, Melissa, watching the hearing today, did anything in particular stick out to you?
Well, one thing that stuck out to me was that, yes, the administration got a real drubbing from the court, although Cecilia Wang, who argued on behalf of the ACLU and these immigrant plaintiffs, also got some questioning from a very hot bench. So both sides, I think, got it pretty good here. But I really want to emphasize that this is not a case that the court needed to hear. As you've noted, earlier last year, they took up the whole question of whether or not the nationwide injunction should be used as a remedy for addressing unconstitutional violations. And it was in the context of a challenge to this executive order. The court at that time could have addressed this substantive question of the meaning of the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, as the plaintiffs in that case asked them to do. And they declined to do so. They declined to settle the issue when they could have done so a year ago. And so we have been living with this uncertainty for more than a year. I mean, again, the court is to blame for this because it's a pretty clear issue that's settled by very clear text in the Constitution. And the president and his administration are basically like Gretchen Wiener from Mean Girls, trying to make fetch happen. And the court a year ago could have been Regina George and said, it's not going to happen.
You have won me over many times with your Mean Girls reference. Basil, so just...
I haven't seen Mean Girls.
You what?
No, I know.
Neither have I.
We have to rectify that after the show tonight. We're going to stick around and watch. Okay. But that's neither here nor there.
Millennial rage.
Exactly. Basil, Justice Amy Coney Barrett referred to the idea that ending birthright citizenship could lead to messy disputes over parental status and citizenship. What do you make of that comment?
I mean, it's beyond messy, right? I mean, you're throwing the entire country into chaos. Nobody is talking. Let me say what I want to say about this point, because the reality is, and Melissa's right. You know, these are conversations that included immigrants at the time, whether they be Irish, Italian, but even though immigrants at that country at that point in time were sort of ridiculed and deemed not American. Somewhere in the 1920s, whiteness was consolidated in our country. And therefore, whatever white you were, it was us, it was them against us. And the us is Black, it's Latino, it's Asian. And to me, this is a direct result of the president doing his let's test everything doctrine as a result of elevating constituencies in this country that have the most extreme points of view, including the belief that we've got to now rid our country of people that don't look like us, that don't talk like us, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Bovino said that he had a plan to deport 100 million people, which is like a third of the population.
So all of this is connected, right? These things aren't happening in silos. All of this is connected. Also consider the fact that the president has ended temporary status for a lot of different people who've come here, but he's put out the red carpet for white South Africans, refugees. Are you kidding me? So to me, this is very clear. This is about trying to define what it is to be an American. And that definition largely does not include people that look like me. And that is, as I said, a direct result of this president and the party that he belongs to elevating the most fringe parts of our country and mainstreaming them. And so you get what we have now. And, you know, I go to what Cheryl and Eiffel, who used to run LDF, said, you know, earlier, that the president is in that courtroom making sure that the people he appointed do his bidding and testing to the limits of presidential power. That's how far he's going to go to make the country that he wants to make.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how effective he'll be at getting
correct,
bidding,
but right.
Yeah.
I think the other question that comes up too is how do you define citizenship in the United States? I mean,
that's right.
We've heard J.D. Vance talk about lineage back to the Civil War as being maybe the legitimate, way in which we define who's a citizen. Can you trace your ancestry back to 1865?
I mean, which is not good for his wife, whose parents are immigrants.
It's not good for the president's three children.
Or J.D. Vance's children, or the president's children.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Hayes, we've been talking about how this is part of the broader picture of Trump's immigration policies. And I guess I'm wondering, given how unpopular the president's immigration agenda has proved, if you look at polling, it is terrible. I do kind of wonder how the general population, to the extent it's paying attention to something like these Supreme Court hearings, how normal people are interpreting all of this. Like, is it as offensive and odious and alienating as Basil laid out? Or, I don't know, is it just washing over?
I think that to the extent that people are paying attention to it, they're the ones who really care. I feel like they are heated about it. They are fired up about it. I think for a lot of people, though, it's just unfathomable. Like, not only is it the question of how would this even work if we were to take away birthright citizenship, what does that look like? I think that at oral arguments, one of the points that John Sauer made was that, if there's a question at the time of birth about parentage, then the parent can just sue the Social Security Administration to
Easy
peasy. And meanwhile, that child is for months in limbo. That baby is for months in limbo, not able to get proper health care, not able to get proper services. If they are a child that does need access to, like, WIC, for example, and the mother needs access to WIC, they won't be able to get that during those months. So I think for a lot of people, this is so outside of the norm of what we were taught, outside of the norm of what we've come to understand as how to be an American. I think for a lot of people, until we see those sort of things come into actual effect, it'll just be either sort of noise, sort of theory that we'll never have to grapple with.
I think one of the greatest ironies, too, is this happens in a period where we've had net out-migration of individuals for the first time since the 1930s and a baby bust going on at the same time, where there's 1.6 women born to 1.6 children, born to a woman, which is below the population replacement rate. So we're playing with fire demographically here in the United States.